Thank you. I am so very humbled to be here, and I'm very excited to be here. I was told to stay in this spot, so I'm going to do my very best. I like to walk and talk, but thank you so much, Lori, for that gracious introduction. I agree, it was definitely a God moment. Just in a break, asked her a question, and boom, here we are. So I don't take it for granted. I'm very humbled to be here to share my knowledge and what I know from my experience and from what I've learned. So tonight's topic is about boundaries. That's everywhere right now, right? You hear a lot of people talking about have healthy boundaries, stay out of toxic relationships, don't let this person manipulate you, they're gaslighting you. You hear all of these words, which basically say someone doesn't have healthy boundaries. But the question is, well, what is that? How is that modeled for me? How do I know if I have healthy boundaries? Because sometimes we don't know. We're creatures of being able to absorb our environment, and sometimes we mirror that, or sometimes we see and we say absolutely not, and we go the exact opposite way. And so tonight, the first goal is to figure out what are boundaries. So when I think about boundaries, there are a lot of different types of personal boundaries, but essentially it's an invisible barrier that we put up that says this is where I end and where you begin, okay? We are responsible for setting our own boundaries and communicating those to other people. If you're like me, it's really easy to assume that other people know our boundaries, but that's unfair to that other person because everybody's boundaries are different based on what they're comfortable with, based on what they know, based on what they've seen. And so we get to set this invisible barrier that says, this is a line where you can't cross in whatever area. So this also includes being able to say no to people. Oh, I see some heads shaking. I see some eyes averting. I can still see you. Even if you're not looking at me, I can still see you. That's hard. It's hard to say no. But it's hard to say no when you haven't practiced it, number one, or you don't know what your boundary is. So tonight we're going to work on that. We're going to work on identifying what is my boundary so that I can communicate that to other people and then reinforce that with the no or yes whenever it pops up. So when it comes to what types of boundaries are there, so boundary styles, they go on a continuum. So we have two extremes and we have healthy right in the middle. So the first one are rigid boundaries. I'm going to list some characteristics, and I want you to be listening, and I want you to think, is this me or have I seen this? People with rigid boundaries avoid intimacy in close relationships. They're unlikely to ask for help, have few close relationships, very protective of personal information, may seem detached even in romantic relationships, and keep others at a distance to avoid the possibility of rejection. Is any of that resonating with anyone in the room right now? I see some head shaking. I hear some The issue with rigid boundaries, give me some feedback. I'm very interactive, right? I work with kids, so we talk and we play. This is what we do. What is the issue with rigid boundaries? Sometimes when people hear that, they say, oh, I get to protect myself. That's great. That's what we want, right? We want protection. How could that be an issue? Exactly. You don't get close to people. Nobody gets in. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out, okay? We were created to be social beings, and if we're constantly living behind these rigid walls, we can't connect with people. We're not growing from other people. Iron is not sharpening iron, and we're not feeding into other people. So yes, it does protect us, but it also keeps us isolated and socially withdrawn. Okay. On the other extreme from rigid, we have porous boundaries, sometimes called enmeshed boundaries. I'm going to read these. I want you to listen. Tell me if they sound familiar. Overshare personal information, difficulty saying no to the requests of others, getting over-involved in other people's problems, dependent on the opinions of others, accepting of abuse or disrespect, and I'm going to give you this caveat. Accepting means tolerating. It does not mean preventing, okay? I want to be very clear about that. We cannot prevent if someone is being abusive or disrespectful, but we get to choose whether we tolerate it and accept it ongoing. And then fearing rejection if they do not comply with others. Talk to me about porous boundaries. I heard some, yep, I got a hand raise. That's more, okay. Yes. And that is such a good point. She was saying that she feels like before she went through her healing, that it was a mixture of both of those extremes to the degree that she would dissociate while those things were happening and then come back and say, well, that actually was me, but I wasn't there, type of a situation, which is a good example because sometimes we have different boundaries depending on the environment. So with our family, we might have some more of those enmeshed, porous boundaries. Maybe we're just oversharing. At work, we might have more rigid boundaries. Maybe we just don't trust our coworkers so hot, so we just got to keep it to ourselves. And then with family or friends, there might be a more healthy type. But the porous boundaries are the oversharing of information. We give away too much too soon, and that's where trust can be violated. So anytime that there is an oversharing of information, it's important to know. We always think, well, this person must trust me because they're telling me so much. I would like to almost argue that I just met them. Why do they trust me so much? Okay? Because healthy boundaries are mutual. I know what you know, and we share back and forth. So if you tell me your first name, I'm not going to tell you my medical record right off the top, right? That's not mutual. Those are porous boundaries. You're oversharing that information. So those are the two extremes. Now in the middle, the goal, what we're looking for, are healthy boundaries. Valuing your own opinions, not compromising your values for others, sharing personal information in an appropriate way, so not oversharing and not undersharing, knows personal wants and needs and can communicate those, and accepting when others say no to them. Okay? So you have a healthy boundary if someone tells you no, that you can accept that. Talk to me a little bit about healthy boundaries. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that because it is uncomfortable when you're not used to hearing yourself say no, where you're not used to seeing people get disappointed, when you are hearing their responses, whether they're aggressive, passive aggressive, however they choose to communicate that, it's very uncomfortable. And with that, I say that number one, people are going to get mad if you tell them no and you start setting a boundary. So just expect it. Just expect it. You know, in worst case scenario, they don't get mad and praise God, right? But they may get mad because you're telling them no, and we don't like to be told no. Even people with healthy boundaries, we don't like to be told no. So you can expect that they may get upset because of that. But there is a difference between feeling uncomfortable and being unsafe, okay? We can tolerate discomfort. If it is an unsafe situation, that's something that's very different. But you can, you know, you're saying, yes, I feel uncomfortable right now, but can I tolerate this? Most of the time, yes. Yeah. Awesome. So those are the different types of boundaries as far as our boundary styles. We typically have a default that we go to, and sometimes we have to do some self-talk to get ourselves back to healthy. But we usually have a default style. We want to get to healthy. Any questions so far? Any thoughts about those three types? Give me a little bit more. Yes. Oh, sure. Mhm. Yes. Yes. Oh, that's so good. We are going to talk about how to set healthy boundaries. So what? Oh, go ahead. Yes. Oh. Okay. Repeat it. Okay. Okay, gotcha. I gotcha. Yes. So the question was, how do how do we not go from one extreme to the other? How do we develop the healthy boundaries? So we will talk about how to set healthy boundaries specifically, and it's knowing your values, being able to set those things specifically, and then reinforcing them, and figuring out what that sounds like and looks like specifically, because it is in the delivery of the message. So it's in the tone, it's in the volume, it's in the word choice that matters when setting boundaries in a healthy way. Yes, very good. Okay. So in your packet of information, you have a list of personal boundaries. So there are 6 that are listed there. I'm not going to go through all 6 of them in detail, but what I do want you to know, again, is that we set our own boundaries in these areas. So what you might notice is, as we go through these, that you might have rigid boundaries in one specific area. You might have porous boundaries in another area, but you might be really, really healthy in the other 4, right? So the goal is to say, what is my boundary type, and then where do I notice it? Because that's where you'll focus on setting healthy boundaries. So sometimes we don't need to set them all together. It may just be in one area where we need to set healthy boundaries. So we'll focus on those. We set our boundaries. It's important that we understand that other people's boundaries may differ. And just as other people may violate our boundaries, we may be responsible for violating other people's boundaries. So as much as it is important for us to set healthy boundaries, it's important that we recognize other people's healthy boundaries and their boundary lines as well to be able to reciprocate that. So the first one is physical boundaries. Does everybody have the handout? Everybody see what I'm talking about? Yes, front page. Thank you. So physical boundaries are your personal space and physical touch. Understanding what is your boundary when it comes to your physical body, but also your personal space, okay? So that means going through somebody's dresser drawers, opening up the glove compartment and digging around in there, opening up their phone, right? Those are physical boundary violations if the person has said that that is uncomfortable for them, or they have set that standard that this is their line that they do not want crossed, okay? Again, that's different because in certain relationships, it can be okay for somebody just to give you a hug, right? We go to family reunions or we see people we haven't seen in forever. It's just natural just to give you a hug. However, if that makes you uncomfortable with a coworker doing that, or a previous partner doing that, or someone doing that with your child, because we have to set physical boundaries and model those for children as well, then that is when you speak up, when you notice that that is a boundary violation. Again, those differ for people. But if we don't say, that makes me uncomfortable when you rub my shoulder without my permission, then we don't set the boundary. And inadvertently, that allows that other person to think it's okay. Does that make sense? So, again, we're responsible for communicating that and reinforcing it when it happens. Okay? Intellectual boundaries, so thoughts and ideas. We don't have to think the same way. We don't have to have the same beliefs. But the boundary violation happens when I start to belittle you because of your beliefs, when I start to belittle you because of what you think. So that can sound like name calling. It's stupid because you believe this way. You're dumb because you trust this person. Okay? You don't believe what I believe, so now it's name calling and causing an issue. Does that make sense? So again, we can agree to disagree. My boundary might be, as soon as we start talking about some of these hot topics, like politics or whatever, I might just say, that's something that I don't feel comfortable talking about right here at the lunch table. And that's my boundary. Because if it continues, you might notice you're starting to respond in a way. Physically, you're starting to the heart's racing, you're getting sweaty, and all these names are coming in your mind that you might name call. So that's your sign like, nope, we're not having this conversation. I'm going to draw the line right here. So again, what's appropriate to talk about when? At the dinner table, we might just strictly talk about weather and the Royals and the Chiefs, and that's where I set my boundary, and nothing beyond that, because beyond that is going to be a violation. Emotional boundaries are feelings. This is one that I believe we can violate our own boundaries with. What do I mean by that? You have a feeling, you have an emotion, and then you tell yourself it's ridiculous because you feel that way. That is you violating your own boundaries. And a lot of the times that comes from an external influence. So maybe you grew up in a place where they said, we don't get mad, it's ridiculous to get sad, why are you crying, knock it off. volunteers aren't accepted here. So that voice has now become your voice, and you start to violate your own boundaries. It's the same with other people as well. I do see this a lot with children, with parents saying, stop crying, knock it off, grow up. You don't need to be sad about that. That is a violation to your child's emotional boundaries. Because what we're saying is that what you feel isn't real, so feel what I think you should be feeling. And to any of the little people inside of us, that doesn't feel good as adults either. Being told that what you feel isn't important or it's not real. Now, emotions in and of themselves are not bad. It's what we do with them. Our brain is going to feel what it feels, but I get to choose what I do with that feeling. And that is where the boundaries come into place, even when it comes to how I treat myself and how I talk with myself, as well as other people. So the emotional boundaries are the feelings. And then there's sexual boundaries, again, all the aspects of sexuality, and then what I choose to do with that, where I set my line, where I says this is okay and this is not okay, and how I communicate and reinforce that. Material boundaries are monies and possessions. So what I hear a lot of is, this is my friend, I'm just going to give them money because I trust them. They have never paid you back. That is a boundary violation. Oh, I just met them 2 weeks ago. We have so much in common. I let them drive my car to work. Boundary violation, right? I know that there's no timetable on how you connect with people, like 6 months, whatever the case may be. However, there is still mutuality that's there. Where can you meet? Where's a healthy boundary? I can give you a ride to work. I can arrange, I can pay for an Uber for you. That's the same thing as being there and helping and supporting somebody, but not violating a boundary to the degree to where now it's that porous and enmeshed boundary type to where you're over-giving, oversharing. So your stuff. And then also how you treat other people's stuff, okay? Some people have the mindset of, well, I'm just going to treat it like it's mine. I don't know if that's good or bad for some people, but it's also knowing that if someone allows you to borrow their things, that it's important that you take care of it. Because although they may say, well, just treat it like it's yours, depending on how you treat your stuff, that might not be okay. So understanding that too, money and possessions, these are my things. And then time boundaries refers to how we use our time and then how that reflects within our relationships as well. So if you are a person who has multiple roles, mom, you may be a grandparent, you may be an employee, how do you spend your time in each one of those roles? Is there one role that is taking over completely the rest of them? And then also how we honor other people's time. Are you on time when you said something for someone? Or are you always late? That's a boundary violation for somebody else. Because that communicates that, well, your time's really not that important. That's a time boundary violation, okay? Also, how much time some people, I don't know if you guys ever know this, but they like to talk on the phone for a lot of times. So you're on the phone for hours. And it's like, what is happening? That could be a time boundary violation. But again, it's our responsibility to communicate that, okay? So the 6 types of boundaries, again, understanding and questioning, where are my boundaries in this area? Would I determine if they're porous, are they rigid, or are they healthy in these different areas? So I'm going to give you just a minute just to look at it. Again, I know that they can't hear us very well, so we don't have to have communication, but I just want you to look at that, absorb it, make notes if you need to about where you are in those areas. Where are your boundaries in that area? Okay, so we've talked about what is a boundary. So again, it's that invisible barrier that we put up that says this is where I end and where you begin. The types of boundaries can go from one extreme to the other with rigid and porous, but the ideal is healthy right there in the middle. And it can be in any of those 6 areas that you may notice that there is a boundary that's not healthy. So the question is, how do I set a healthy boundary, which is what came up. So you should have this handout as well, setting healthy boundaries. And the first thing is to know your boundaries. So what do I deem as uncomfortable for me when it comes to physical touch? Do I even know what that is? Because sometimes we don't. We've had people who have told us what was okay. We've had people who have told us what we should accept. Society has shaped what's appropriate and what's not for us. And so we have not come to understand, what are my boundaries? Because that's a big question that I get when I ask people, well, what are your boundaries in this area? I don't know. Maybe they've been violated so much that I don't have a clue what they are. Maybe I never had them established because, again, I've been connected to people who have set that up for me, so I've never actually had to set my own boundaries because people have done it. And so that's going to take some self-awareness. You're reflecting back on, well, when did I feel uncomfortable when somebody hugged me without my permission? Or was I okay when that person touched me on their shoulder? Or did my body respond, say, I don't like that? And so knowing your own boundaries is really important so that you can communicate those. So that's the first one. Again, based on your values and what's important to you. And like was said before, that could be so different from even the people closest to you, especially when it comes to time. I don't know if anyone's ever taken like the love languages quiz, but if somebody's love language is quality time and yours isn't, there might be some values that are rubbing against each other, some boundaries that might not mesh. And so you're understanding that I get to set my own boundaries. I'm empowered to set my own boundaries. And it's my responsibility to communicate even if it makes the other person uncomfortable, because again, that doesn't mean that they're unsafe. It's just uncomfortable. So what are your values that will help you to set your boundaries? And being able, again, to communicate those no matter the environment. So in the example, it says that if you value spending time with your family, then you set that boundary with your job, which is I'm not going to work overtime. Now, again, I know that sounds ideal, so I'm not telling you to go in tomorrow into work and be like, excuse me, my values are I'm time with my family, I'm not going to be here late. But what I am saying that it's important to communicate that. So that way, if you need to then set additional time aside with your family, that you're creating space to be able to do that, because that is your value and that's what's important to you. If our lifestyle does not align with our values, we will experience an increase in distress, okay? So if safety and security is a value of mine and that's marked by how much money I have in the bank and now it's not looking like that, my distress is going to go up because my value is being almost taunted. It's being threatened at that point. So knowing your values are very, very important. Your boundaries are yours and yours alone. Healthy boundaries are flexible. What do I mean by that? So just because I meet you today and we don't share a whole lot of personal information doesn't mean that as we spend more time together that I start to allow you to get closer to me. Healthy boundaries are flexible. By that same token, if you consistently violate my boundaries after I've given you opportunity to change, that boundary line is going to move out. Okay? Healthy boundaries have to be able to move, because if not, again, we're getting ourselves stuck in one of those two extremes so that there's nothing in, nothing out, or too much in, too much out. And then know your boundaries before entering a situation. So that way you're less likely to do something that you're not comfortable with. This goes for an interview at work, starting a relationship, starting a new friendship, asking somebody for help, okay? Knowing what you're willing to be okay with. If somebody calls you and says, hey, I need something, can we sit down and talk? Have in your mind, what am I okay with doing before I even go in this? And rehearse that script in your mind so that way you're secure in what it is that you will or won't do when you enter that situation. And here's some examples of having the right to say no. Sometimes people think that setting a boundary and saying no is just like, no, and doing a fast run away. But it's not. There's a gentle way to do it so that you feel comfortable saying it and so that it can be better received from other people. So just saying simply, I'm not comfortable with this. Somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, I need a ride to the airport and back, but you're like, oh, I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable doing that. Okay? That is simple enough to say no. I can't do that for you. Talk about being clear. Hey, can I borrow $600? My rent is due. I cannot do that for you. She said, no, of course not. I cannot do that for you. Okay? If you can offer an alternate, then you can. You can give them an alternative. Maybe you don't have $600. Maybe you have $50 to help them with something different. Maybe you don't have anything at all, so you're just simply saying no. You don't have to come up with an excuse. You don't have to be over apologetic. The simple response can be, I cannot do that for you. This is not acceptable. Somebody goes through your car and takes something out of the glove compartment. You approach them and you say, that's not acceptable for you to go through my things and take things without my permission. Please don't do that. Coworker comes up, touches you on the shoulder, it makes you uncomfortable. Please don't touch me on the shoulder. This doesn't work for me. If it's a time thing, if you know you have to get to work, you're going to get kids ready, and the time frame that somebody wants to meet or talk with you doesn't work, simply, this does not work for me. This time doesn't work for me. I'm drawing the line at. Oh, that's one of my favorite ones, because that's when you know you've said it. You probably told them a second time, and now we're at the third time. Now I have to tell you directly. I'm drawing the line at calling me at midnight for a ride. I've said I will give you a ride no later than 8 p.m. You've called me 3 times. I'm drawing the line at this point. Do not call me again at midnight. Not at this time. It's important that if you mean not at this time, that you're giving an alternate, because the expectation is that that person is going to come back. So don't use not at this time if you have zero intention on doing it later. That's a very clear no. Your no should be very clear. Don't be ambiguous, because some people, we assume that people will take the hint, but we cannot assume that people will take the hint. So if you mean no and not ever, it's important to say no, not ever, in a way that will be received. If it's no, not at this time, but you're open to later, then that one will work for you. And I've decided not to. Maybe you told somebody that you would think on a proposition that they gave, and you gave it some time, you thought it over, and you decided, no, this is not going to work for me. Then you can say, I've decided not to. Or simply, I don't want to do that. If you have toddlers, you probably have heard this plenty of times. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Toddlers can set some boundaries really, really well. We should probably learn from them. But just simply saying, I don't want to do that. That is the way to say it. And to your point of how to say that without sounding aggressive or sounding pushy or violent in any way, is your tone and the delivery of it. It makes a difference. Your volume, your word choice. I believe we also have a default communication style, and mine is sarcasm. I'll be honest. My default communication style is sarcasm. So I have to check myself when I'm setting a boundary, and I mean it, to not sound sarcastic. And that takes a lot of self-awareness, because sometimes it can be easy to get nice nasty, just right in that little spot, that little place. And so I do have to check my tone, or if I'm texting, we know how texting can be misinterpreted, checking my word choice with text messages as well to make sure it's received in a way that is assertive. So again, right in that healthy way of speaking, so that it's not taken as aggressive and it's not taken as passive, because that's the other extreme. You said feeling like a doormat, or that's not passive, because it sounds different to say, I've decided not to do that. I don't feel comfortable with making that choice. Then, I don't think I want to do that. I don't know. I don't know. Okay? Very different. And so the way that you communicate that makes a difference. And that's what keeps you in that healthy space when it comes to communicating what you want and need. And then what to do. Body language makes a difference. Again, be respectful. Plan ahead. So if you do have the time to come up with what you want to say, if you do have the time to kind of, again, come up with a script of what's going to be important for you to say, then plan ahead as much as you can. And then compromise. Sometimes people hear compromise and it's like, but it's not a bad thing. Be willing to negotiate. So for instance, if I want for you to let me know if you're going to be coming home late, okay? I'm getting dinner already and I want you to let me know when you're going to come home. I might be willing to compromise on the way that you let me know that you're going to be coming home late, if it's an email, a text message, a phone call, but I'm unwilling to negotiate or compromise, that I still want to be contacted. Okay? Does that make sense? So we're not compromising on what we're asking for. We may be compromising on how we get it, and that is okay. That is where that negotiation piece comes into play. Okay? So what are boundaries? The 3 different types of boundaries, the 6 personal boundaries that you have, and then also how do you set the healthy boundaries. So I'm going to give you just a minute. Again, I want you to look at this setting healthy boundaries, and I want you to determine which one of these areas might be a struggle for me. Do I know what my boundaries are? Maybe that's something that to work on. Maybe I just don't have the words to say no or express myself clearly. My body language doesn't sound confident. I don't think ahead about what's going on. I just kind of, at spur of the moment, just blurt it out. I could be more respectful. I could be a little more willing to compromise instead of stuck in just kind of what I believe. I just want you to look at this for a minute and just take a note of what it is that you think. So we are going to get into discussion groups, which there'll be some questions. Are the questions in the packet too? They are? Okay, perfect. So your discussion questions are in your packet. And it's time just for you all to discuss together some of those topics or anything that's come up for you regarding boundaries and what that means. Okay. You have them? Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, yes. So you'll be moved into groups, and then your small group leader will have those questions ready for you once they move you into the groups. Perfect. Okay. So what I want you to remember is that, as scary as it may sound, that it's your responsibility to set boundaries, it's very empowering because we teach people how to treat us by what we do and do not tolerate. There is a way to set boundaries in love. There is a way to set boundaries by being kind and gentle. There is a way to say no in ways that will make it more likely to be received. You can be great at setting healthy boundaries, but it's important to also know when it's time to not be in that relationship anymore. Because saying boundaries over and over and over again and that's not being received may be a sign that there needs to be some change within that relationship. Okay? Whether it ends, whether there's proximity, there's time, space, whatever the case may be, so that you're not completely around that person for the boundaries to be continuously violated, whatever that means. But you are responsible for setting your own boundaries. You are empowered to set your own boundaries. What's important to you is important and should not be taken lightly. Your physical space, your intelligent ideas, your possessions, all of those things that you've worked so hard, the person that you've worked so hard to become, should be protected by setting those healthy boundaries. And that responsibility is yours, and it's a beautiful responsibility to have. And so I just encourage you to not take it lightly, but to take it with power, that you are capable of making those changes and you are capable of teaching people how to treat you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. And one of the things that really resonated with me is violated. Our boundaries are violated. I think I'm really going to take that to heart. Life mission. We're going to break into small groups. Those watching us on Facebook, we're glad to have all of us together tonight, and now look forward to our discussions individually. If you're watching on Facebook and you would like to receive the handouts that Renee gave, that just kind of recaps what she's been talking about, email me, Lori@thesinglemomkc.org, LORI@thesinglemomkc.org. So everybody, good night, Life Mission. Good night, those who are watching on Facebook. We'll see you next month. Bye-bye.